She only made one call, barely able to speak, her face swollen, her hands shaking, but that call didn't go to a neighbor or a lawyer. It went to the head of the state police, her son, and in less than 72 hours, the local department that thought no one would care learned what happens when the woman they brutalized is the mother of the man who commands their chain of command. It was a Tuesday, quiet, hot, thick, with Georgia humidity. Martha Clemmons stood outside Redwell Pharmacy, her cane resting beneath her right hand, her other wrapped loosely around the handle of her floral tote. She wasn't moving much, just shifting her weight now and then, watching the street, waiting. Her son had told her he'd be 5 minutes late. No rush, she'd said. I've waited longer for less. She'd worn her church sandals that day, the ones with the gold buckle and low heel. Her pressed white blouse fluttered faintly in the breeze, the kind of breeze that pretends to help but doesn't. She adjusted her wide straw hat and checked her phone. No missed calls, no messages, just quiet, until the cruiser pulled up. 2 officers, one younger, twitchy, the other older, heavy-set, already annoyed. They didn't approach like they were checking on her. They approached like she was a problem to be solved. One stepped out, hand resting near his belt. The other called out through the open window. "Ma'am, what are you doing here?" She turned slowly, polite. "Just waiting on a ride, baby." "My sons, do you have business in the store?" "No, sir. Just needed shade while I wait." "Ain't blocking nothing." The younger officer stepped closer. "We got a call about loitering." She blinked. "Loitering. I need to see some ID." She reached carefully into her purse. The older officer flanked her right. "You can't stand here, ma'am." Martha raised her chin slightly. "It's a public sidewalk." That's when things shifted. The younger one reached for her wrist. Fast. She flinched. "I said give me your ID." "I am," she said, voice steady, even as her hand shook. The older one stepped behind her, nudged her cane with his foot. She nearly lost her balance. "Hey now, don't," she started. Then the cane was yanked. Just like that. No warning, no cause, just gone. Her right leg faltered. Her left shoe caught the edge of the curb. She didn't cry out. Didn't even have time. Her body folded like cloth, slow in memory, fast in real time. Her face struck the concrete with a sound too soft to echo, but hard enough to split skin. No crowd, no witnesses, just a mounted security camera fixed to the pharmacy awning. The footage would later show one officer kneeling, more from protocol than concern, and the other calling it in, as a slip and fall. But what the footage doesn't show, the look in her eye when she opened it, blood trailing down her temple, her hat crushed beneath her. She didn't curse. She didn't plead. She just whispered, "Let me make a call." The back of the ambulance was dim, humming with quiet urgency. The EMT adjusted the IV, careful not to touch the swelling along Martha's jaw. Her left eye was closing fast, skin blooming purple, where bone met pavement. She didn't groan, didn't ask questions. She just breathed, slow and ragged. "Ma'am," the medic said gently, kneeling beside her. "We're almost there. Can you hear me?" Her lips barely moved. He leaned closer. "Call my son," she said. 4 words, sandpaper thin. "You have a name." She blinked once. "Eric." The medic nodded, reaching into her purse. No ID, no phone in sight, until he found it tucked beneath a folded church bulletin. The screen was cracked. The wallpaper, a faded photo of a family barbecue. One contact was pinned to the top. The name just said, E. He pressed it. 2 rings. Then a voice. Calm, low. Not tired, not worried. "Yeah." The medic hesitated. Sir, I'm with EMS. I have Martha Clemmons in transport." Where is she?" The voice cut in. No panic, no fumbling. The medic gave the hospital name, then added, "She's conscious, but she fell, took a bad hit to the face." Silence on the line. Not long, but long enough to feel the weight of it. "I'll be there in 30, the voice said. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't ask who. He didn't ask why. Just hung up. The medic looked down at Martha. She'd closed her eyes again, lips moving like she was mouthing scripture, or maybe just breathing through the pain. Either way, she hadn't passed out. She was still here, still present. "Your son's coming," he said, adjusting the blanket over her shoulders. She didn't respond. but the faintest breath passed her lips. Good. He pulled into the hospital lot at 6:42 p.m. No lights, no sirens. Just a black government SUV, easing into a space marked authorized vehicles only. Eric Clemmons stepped out in silence. Dark slacks, rolled sleeves, a badge clipped to his belt, and a calm that didn't match the sharpness in his eyes. Inside, the security guard started to speak, then stopped. Something about Eric's walk, or maybe the way the sliding doors seemed to open wider for him than they did for anyone else. He didn't go to the front desk. He didn't need to. Room 209. Second floor, west wing. He took the stairs. A nurse stepped into the hallway just as he reached the floor. She paused. "Can I help you?" "Yes," he said, voice measured. "Martha Clemmons." She pointed left. "She's stable," but he was already moving. When he entered the room, she was still, one eye swollen shut, IV in one arm, a thin blanket draped across her lap. She turned her head slightly at the sound of his footsteps. "Hey baby," she whispered. He didn't smile. He didn't cry. He took her hand. "Who did this?" She didn't answer, didn't need to. Her fingers curled around his. The nurse returned. "Are you family?" Eric reached into his wallet, pulled out a card, and held it out without looking away from his mother. It read, Eric D. Clemmons, Superintendent State Police, Office of Public Integrity and Oversight. The nurse blinked. "Oh," he stood, "I need names." "I'm sorry, officers on scene. The ones who called this in. The ones who touched her. I think it was a local unit, City PD. Then call them." She hesitated. "Sir, we usually go through." Eric's voice didn't rise, but it dropped in a way that left no space for debate. "Call them." The nurse nodded. Already turning, he sat again, brushing a thumb gently across the back of his mother's hand. "You said you wouldn't get involved again," she whispered. "I wasn't planning to." She closed her eyes. "You're here." "I am." And now, he looked at the bruise forming along her temple, the dried blood at her hairline. "Now I fix it." There was no ceremony in his tone, no drama, just a man who'd seen systems break from the inside out, and had learned exactly how to press where it hurts. The next morning, Eric Clemmons was already in motion. He didn't wait for protocol. He didn't ask for permission. At 7:14 a.m., he walked into the downtown Municipal Operations Center with a state-level clearance badge, and the kind of silence that made mid-level bureaucrats sweat through their collars. A woman at the front desk stood to greet him. He didn't return the gesture, just held up his ID and said, "Surveillance, North Pine and East Henderson, yesterday, between 5:40 and 6:10 p.m. She started to protest, something about jurisdiction, about needing approval from the local chief. Eric said one word, "Override." 10 minutes later, he was in a back room lined with monitors. A technician pulled up the requested time frame. There was no need for a second angle, no need for multiple perspectives. The footage spoke for itself. Martha Clemmons, standing still, patient, cane in one hand, purse in the other. 2 officers, approaching fast. No conversation, no reasoning, just posturing. A grab, a shove, the cane stripped from her like she was holding contraband, not stability. Her fall was sudden, unprotected. Her head clipped the curb with a sound you could feel, even through a mute feed. No one ran to help. No one called out. Just uniforms, adjusting posture, covering tracks before the damage could settle in. Eric didn't flinch. He watched the entire sequence once, then again, slower, frame by frame. The technician shifted nervously. "Do you want me to burn a copy?" Eric didn't answer, just pulled a USB drive from his coat pocket. Encrypted. The man took it with both hands. Before leaving, Eric turned back toward the screen. It was paused, his mother frozen mid-fall, body already past the point of saving itself. He stared at it for a long time. Then he said, low and even, "They chose the wrong woman, not out of fear, not even out of anger, but because he already knew what came next. And so would they." Martha Clemmons didn't grow up afraid of uniforms. She just learned early not to trust them. She was 13 when she marched in Selma. Her shoes were too big, borrowed from her cousin, and her knees ached by mile 2, but she walked. Not because she was brave, but because her grandmother had pressed a hand to her chest that morning and said, "If they see your heart steady, baby, they can't take it from you." Years later, that same steadiness carried her through stacks of library books and budget cuts. She was the first black woman to run the public library in East Wilton County, kept it open with bake sale money and duct tape when the city slashed funding, taught generations of children how to read beneath flickering lights and leaky ceilings. She never raised her voice, never missed a Sunday service, never forgot a birthday card. And when Eric brought home a busted lip in 9th grade, said a boy called him something he shouldn't have, she didn't grab a coat and storm the school. She sat him down. "Don't fight with fists," she told him, handing him a copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. "Fight with facts. Fists only bruise, facts stick." It annoyed him then. Felt too calm, too soft, but he never forgot it. Even after he joined the force, even after he stopped believing that justice always followed the rules. Now watching her lie in a hospital bed, Eve taped to her skin, bruises forming like ink blots across her face, he understood what she meant in a way he never had before. This wasn't a moment for fists. It was a moment for facts, undeniable ones. On video, in records, tied with timelines and silence and names that had grown too comfortable behind their badges, the kind of truth that couldn't be spun, couldn't be buried, not without someone noticing. He stood by the hospital window, watching the parking lot fill with morning traffic. His reflection in the glass looked tired, but alert. The uniform had changed over the years. First patrol blues, then detective grey, now state black with silver trim, but his posture never had. Straight, still, prepared. Behind him, Martha stirred. Her voice was gravel soft. "You still here?" "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "Just don't lose yourself in the fixing." He turned to her. "You told me to fight with facts." She gave the faintest smile, though it made her wince. "I didn't know it'd be me one day." Eric didn't respond. He didn't need to, because he wasn't just fixing it for her. He was making sure no other mother had to teach that lesson again. The file didn't come from a court order. It came from a conversation. Eric Clemmons didn't bang on doors or flash headlines. He walked into City Precinct 12 with a coffee in hand and a look that made grown men check their tone. He didn't need backup. His badge did the talking. His silence did the rest. He didn't ask for permission to view the incident log. He said, "Pull it." The clerk behind the desk hesitated. Older man, graying beard, smart enough to know when the usual dance wasn't going to work. He tapped a few keys, eyes flicking between Eric and the screen. Officers of record, Terry Long and Rachel Deems, both assigned to patrol car 417 last night. Dispatch says they were responding to a loitering complaint. Eric nodded once. Complaint filed by whom? The man shifted. Anonymous. No callback number. Of course. Eric didn't take notes. He didn't need to. He had names now. Officer Terry Long, 12 years on the force. 2 prior excessive force complaints, both marked unsubstantiated. One involved a teenage boy with a skateboard. The other, a mentally ill man outside a shelter. Officer Rachel Deems, 5 years in, transferred from a neighboring county. 1 sealed misconduct case. Internal Affairs Review. No charges. No public details. Until now, Eric didn't ask for the footage. He already had it. He didn't ask who filed what. He already knew it hadn't been logged. What he wanted now were patterns, memos, transfers, sealed warnings tucked in drawers labeled confidential, not to weaponize them, to arrange them like puzzle pieces. Clean, undeniable, and as he moved through the station, quiet as dusk, people started whispering. "That's the state guy, right? No, that's her son. Wait, her? Yeah, that old lady at the pharmacy. No way, way." By the time Eric reached the records room, doors were opening before he knocked. He stood at the edge of a long metal filing shelf, hands behind his back, scanning printed misconduct summaries like they were case photos from a crime scene. Deem's name showed up twice more, in internal memos flagged concern for temperament. Long's name was more frequent, slipped into incident reviews that never made it to press. None of it surprised him. The department hadn't just failed his mother. It had protected the ones who hurt her. He walked out with copies. No subpoena, no threat, just presence. And when he stepped into the sunlight outside the precinct, someone watching from the break room window said it out loud. "She's his mom." Another officer, younger, paled a little. Then we got a problem. The first official statement from Internal Affairs came 36 hours after the incident. It was 2 sentences long. Vague. Sterile. A review in progress. A commitment to transparency. No mention of Martha's name. No acknowledgement of force. Just enough to check a box. Just enough to store. Eric read it once, then closed the tab. They were slow-walking it, hoping the story would die quietly, like so many others had. But this one had something different. It had him. He didn't hold a press conference. Didn't give a quote. He just sent 3 encrypted emails from an account with no name, each to a different journalist. 1 local, 2 national. Attached was a redacted version of a memo that had quietly circulated inside the department 2 days earlier. It warned officers to refrain from engagement with media concerning the pharmacy incident until a unified narrative is approved. He let the memo speak for itself. By the next morning it was front page. Unified narrative. State police chief's mother injured in alleged use of force case. City silent. The phones at City Hall lit up before 9 a.m. By noon the mayor had issued a statement calling the incident deeply concerning. He promised swift accountability. Eric didn't respond. He knew the tone. The too late concern. The polished regret that always arrived once the cameras did. At 4:17 p.m. the mayor's office requested a meeting. Eric declined. Instead he texted a different number. A producer at a national syndicate he trusted. Story's real. They're dragging feet. Want the video? The reply came back in seconds. Yes. Drop it. He did. Anonymous link. No watermark. No commentary. Just the truth. Raw and unedited. By nightfall it was playing on loop across social media. Martha standing still. Officers closing in. Her cane ripped away. Her body folding to the sidewalk. A smear of red. The absence of any justification. The headline changed. Beaten at 76. Mother of state police chief injured by officers in pharmacy lot. Public interest became public pressure. The department still hadn't named the officers, but the people watching didn't need names to feel the shift. And inside the precinct someone finally said it aloud. We waited too long, because by then it wasn't just a story, it was a spotlight. And every delay made the shadows look guilty. Chief Darren Roebuck didn't look up right away. He kept his eyes on the folder in front of him, flipping a page slowly, like he had all the time in the world. But his jaw was tight. The air in his office had changed the moment Martha Clemmons stepped in. Eric didn't sit. He placed a manila folder on the desk, clean, unmarked, already opened. Inside a printed timeline, surveillance stills, a copy of the IA memo that had conveniently gone missing, and a single photo printed in color. Martha Clemmons, on the ground, blood trailing from her temple, her cane just inches from her hand. Roebuck finally looked up. You come here as her son, he said, or as a state official. Eric didn't blink. Both. You could have called. We're reviewing. No, Eric cut in. Calm but exact. You're circling wagons, hoping the outrage burns out before the evidence makes it to daylight. Roebuck leaned back in his chair. We're following procedure. The officers involved are being spoken to. Everything is under review. Then why was the incident logged as a fall? Why no mention of use of force in the original report? The chief didn't answer. Eric stepped forward, tapped the photo. This is not a fall. That's her blood on city pavement. That's your officer's hand on her wrist. That's a cover-up with a badge. You're making assumptions. I'm making records. I've got timestamps from dispatch, mismatched audio logs, and missing footage from one officer's body cam. He dropped another sheet on the desk. A timeline of calls. Internal memos. Discrepancies highlighted in red. Roebuck shifted in his chair. This isn't the way to handle this. Eric's voice stayed low. You will not bury this. Not with your paperwork. Not with your silence. Not with another ongoing reviews that ends in administrative leave and back pay. Roebuck's hand hovered near the folder, but he didn't touch it. What do you want? Eric stared at him. Accountability. Transparency. And her name cleared. The chief swallowed. There's a process. Then speed it up. They stood there for a long second. 2 men in pressed shirts. One with power on paper. The other with power in motion. Roebuck finally said, You know this could tear the department apart. Eric leaned in. Just enough. Then maybe it was built wrong. He turned and walked out, without waiting for a response. Because some truths don't need consent to be spoken. They just need someone who refuses to stay quiet. The hospital room was quiet. Machines hummed low. The air smelled like bleach and old paper, sterile, stubborn. Afternoon light leaked through the blinds, striping the floor in soft gold. Martha Clemmons stirred, her breathing uneven, like her body was still debating whether to wake fully. Eric sat beside her. Same chair, same posture, one hand resting lightly near hers, not touching, just present. Her eye fluttered open. The right one, the left was sealed shut in swelling purple and tender. She didn't wince, didn't flinch, just blinked slowly, adjusting to the light, then to his face. She didn't ask what happened. She already knew. Instead she whispered, "You didn't yell, did you?" Eric exhaled through his nose, a short breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "No, Mama." A pause. "I let the truth do the shouting." She smiled, or tried to. The split at the corner of her mouth tugged painfully, so she stopped, but the intent was there. "That's good," she murmured. They sat like that for a long moment. No rush, no speeches, the kind of silence that only belongs to people who've survived too much to waste breath on noise. Eric leaned forward slightly, his voice lower than before. "They're trying to drag it out. Say they need time. Say they need context." Martha's eyes stayed on him, sharp. "Even now, you give it to him." He nodded once. "Every frame, every report, names, records, sealed files, and they're squirming." She gave the faintest nod. "Good." Eric looked at her then not just as her son, but as a man who had built a career on calm, precise control. And yet here, beside her bruised face and frayed dignity, he felt something deeper than control. He felt purpose. "You don't have to fight the whole thing alone," she said, voice brittle but sure. "I'm not," he replied. "They're listening now, because of you." Martha turned her head slowly, eyes drifting toward the window. "Funny how power works. Some folks need a podium to feel it." She looked back at him. "I just needed a chair, a cane, and the truth." Eric didn't speak. He just reached out, took her hand gently, and held it. The IV beeped once. Outside, a reporter stood across the street from the hospital, speaking into a camera. The video was still looping online. The mayor's second statement had just gone live. Internal Affairs had scheduled a press briefing for the next morning. But inside that room, none of it mattered more than the simple fact that she was awake, and that she was still Martha Clemmons, whole, wounded, unshaken. It started with one message. No name, no greeting, just a timestamp, and a confession. "I changed the language in the report. They told me to write non-compliant." She wasn't. It came through a secure tip line run by a watchdog group. Eric read it twice, then once more, slower. The IP was masked, the email temporary, but it was real. By the end of the day, 4 more came in, one from a desk sergeant. They locked the footage before Aya could request it. One from dispatch. The call didn't match the response. That code wasn't loitering. It was suspicious individual, possible threat. "I didn't write that." And one handwritten scanned, from an officer in another precinct. "Everyone knows Long gets violent. He's been protected for years." Inside the department, the seams began to fray. People stopped speaking in full sentences in the hallways. Doorways were watched. Statements rehearsed. Rumors spilled faster than the command chain could catch them. By the time Eric's phone buzzed with a reporter's name he hadn't spoken to in 2 years, he already knew what she wanted. "You saw the leaks?" she asked. "I did. You want to comment?" "No need. The truth's doing fine on its own." By the following afternoon, the public pressure had turned surgical. Activist groups published a timeline. Church leaders drafted a letter to the mayor. A local high school civics class made protest signs that ended up on the news. Her name was Martha. "Elderly isn't threatening. We saw the tape. What's your excuse?" The city council met behind closed doors that Thursday, hoping to ride it out quietly. They didn't make it through the agenda. A crowd gathered outside, not chanting, just standing, holding photos, candles, Bibles. Inside, a councilwoman cleared her throat and said what everyone was thinking. "We need to call an emergency hearing." No one disagreed, because by then, the department wasn't just under scrutiny, it was under oath. And silence had become its own kind of evidence. The podium was too tall for him. Officer Terry Long shifted behind it, dressed in his formal blues, collar stiff, hands gripping the edges of his prepared statement, like they might run if he let go. Cameras clicked. A small crowd sat stiffly in rows. Most were city officials, a few reporters, and in the second row, quiet and steady, sat Martha Clemmons in a wheelchair, her left eye still shadowed by healing. Eric stood behind her, arms folded, unreadable. Long cleared his throat. "My name is Officer Terry Long," he began, eyes fixed just above the crowd. "On the evening of May 18th, I responded to a call outside Redwell Pharmacy involving a reported suspicious person. During the course of that response, he paused, voice tightening. I acted in a way that resulted in harm to Mrs. Martha Clemmons." He glanced at her, then back to the page. "I want to say publicly and clearly that I regret my actions. I did not intend for anyone to be hurt. I offer my sincere apologies to Mrs. Clemmons and her family." He looked up briefly, then stepped back. No elaboration, no emotion, just enough syllables to meet the moment. The room stayed silent. Martha didn't flinch, didn't nod. She sat with both hands folded in her lap, gaze locked on the man who had taken her cane like it was a threat. Then she spoke, soft even, but loud enough for every microphone to catch. "Words don't heal bruises," she said, "but I'll take them anyway." Long looked down. Everyone else shifted. Eric didn't move. He didn't glare, didn't clap, didn't interrupt. He just watched, every blink, every hesitation, every ounce of discomfort in a man who had never been told no until the truth demanded it. Afterward, as reporters pressed in and officials exchanged relieved glances, Eric wheeled his mother quietly toward the exit. No interviews, no soundbites. Outside the sun was beginning to set. The street smelled faintly of exhaust and warm concrete. A teenager across the road raised a fist in quiet respect. Martha didn't raise hers. She just adjusted her shawl and whispered, "Let's go home." Eric held the door open and followed behind her, step by measured step, because some apologies are heard, but never healed. The announcements came like cracks in old wood. First Officer Rachel Deems submitted her resignation. No press release, no statement, just a typed letter left on the captain's desk at 7:13 a.m., 2 lines long, effective immediately. Then, 3 days later, Officer Terry Long followed. His departure came with a longer letter, one peppered with phrases like deep reflection and personal growth. But no admission, no real ownership, just a quiet exit dressed in formal language. The department tried to frame it as accountability, but by then, everyone knew better. And then came the final shift. Chief Darren Roebuck, the one who'd kept the system stitched just tight enough to keep it from bleeding, stepped down. He called it retirement, said it was time for new leadership. Eric didn't attend the press conference. He was in a small conference room 2 floors above, finalizing language with the State Commission on Law Enforcement Policy. By unanimous vote, the commission had agreed. The incident involving Martha Clemmons would now be part of every cadet's ethics and force evaluation curriculum statewide. Required viewing, required discussion, no exceptions. The footage wouldn't be sanitized. No pixelation, no muted audio, just the truth, as it happened. Martha standing still, the cane ripped away, the fall, the silence that followed. That silence, Eric had argued, was the most dangerous part, because it was never just one shove. It was every system that stayed quiet afterward. That same week, the City Council voted to form a civilian oversight committee, not advisory, not ceremonial, real authority, subpoena power, budget transparency, a mandate to review use of force complaints with an independent lens. The mayor called it a new era. Eric called it overdue. The department bristled. A few held out hope the storm would pass and things would slide back into routine. But the routine was gone. Inside training centers across the state, instructors rewrote their modules. Cadets watched Martha's story not as a case study, but as a mirror, an invitation to see what happens when arrogance outweighs accountability. And in the middle of it all, Eric stood still. He wasn't seeking applause. He wasn't chasing closure. He was just building something that might last longer than headlines. Because systems don't break all at once. They crack slowly. And if you listen closely enough, you can hear when they start to fold. And if you're prepared, you can make sure they don't rebuild the same way again. The first letter arrived folded in half, no return address. Just for Miss Martha, scrawled in careful cursive. Inside, a high school senior wrote about watching the footage with her grandmother and deciding, right then, to apply to the police academy. By the end of the week, there were dozens more. Some came from Georgia, others from New Jersey, Detroit, even Spokane. Not one asked for pity. They weren't letters of sorrow. They were letters of recognition from teachers, nurses, retired soldiers, former foster kids, single mothers. They said things like, "You reminded me I wasn't invisible. When you stood still, I realized I didn't have to move to prove I mattered. I never knew silence could be that powerful." Martha read every one. Sometimes twice. She didn't cry. She didn't dramatize. She just placed each one gently into a wooden box that sat on the side table beside her Bible and her magnifying glass. A living archive of quiet strength. When a local non-profit, Daughters of the Badge, called to ask her permission to name a scholarship in her honor, she didn't know what to say. The caller stammered through the pitch. Funding for young black girls entering law enforcement, full ride to the academy, mentorship included. Martha just said, "Make sure they get good boots. The kind that don't give out when you stand too long." It became the tagline on the website. She didn't attend the launch event. She sent a note instead. Handwritten. "You don't have to become the system. You can become its correction." A few weeks later, without fanfare, she opened the doors of the church basement on a Thursday afternoon. No flyers. No announcement. Just a pot of coffee, a tray of lemon bars and a folding sign that read, "Voices that weren't heard." 5 people came the first week. 8 the next. By the third week, folding chairs had to be borrowed from the choir room. They were mothers, veterans, grocery clerks, 2 teenagers who had never told anyone what it felt like to be stopped and called boy with a smirk. One older man who just said, "I saw what they did to you, and it brought back what they did to me in '87. Martha didn't lead the group. She just made space. No speeches, just listening. Because that's what she'd done all along. Stand, be still, and refuse to be erased. And somehow, without ever meaning to, she built something no one else had thought to build. A place where truth didn't have to shout to be heard. It only had to be believed. The doors opened at 10:01 a.m. Sunlight poured through the stained glass, casting long ribbons of gold and violet across the sanctuary floor. Heads turned. A few gasps slipped out. But no one moved. Not at first. Then came the soft, steady sound of her shoes on tile. Martha Clemmons, hat low, dress crisp, no wheelchair, no cane, just her. She walked with the kind of strength that doesn't come from healing, it comes from surviving. Every step forward was a sentence that said, "I'm still here." She reached the center aisle, and kept going, her shoulders relaxed, her hands at her sides. Not clenched, not shaking, free. One by one the congregation stood. No music played. No words were spoken. It wasn't planned. It wasn't prompted. It was reverence. Not for a woman who'd been broken, but for a woman who refused to be buried beneath apology, beneath spin, beneath a silence that never belonged to her. She didn't nod, didn't wave. Just walked slowly to the third row, sat down, and folded her hands in her lap. Behind her, in the last pew, Eric sat alone. No suit, no badge, no press pass. Just a quiet man watching his mother reclaim something that never should have been taken. He didn't need to be seen, because this had never been about him. Not the headlines, not the hearings, not the policy changes, or the scholarships, or the room full of people who now dared to speak their truth, because she spoke hers first. It was about her, and every woman like her. It was about making sure the next mother didn't fall alone, didn't have to ask for a phone, didn't have to whisper her son's name, like it was a lifeline. As the choir began to hum the first notes of Blessed Assurance, Martha's eyes closed. Her breath slowed. Peace, finally, was not something she had to wait for. It walked in beside her. It stood up with her. And in the back pew, Eric whispered 2 words only she would have recognized. "Thank you." Then he bowed his head. Because justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it walks in quietly, and sometimes it wears a hat, straightens its back, and takes its place in the third row, still standing. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Share it, speak it, teach it. Because Martha Clemmons didn't ask to be a symbol, but now she's a reason. A reason to question. A reason to act. A reason to make sure no mother ever has to whisper her son's name, just to be treated like a human being. Stand for the ones who stood alone. Be the voice for those who were silenced. And if you believe in justice that doesn't wait for permission, pass this on.